In this video I'll show you how to create a pivot chart and how to do some manipulation of that pivot chart. Should hopefully be easier than the pivot table and the data table. But this is the last piece you'll need to work through that first section of the teaching case in order to hand in the deliverables that I ask for. So some of the things we're going to talk about is how to make and take a pivot table that we've already got, and I want you to do this in the case. You need to maintain that data table because that'll be a report in itself we can use for managing. But then we're going to copy that pivot table in to another pivot table and create a pivot chart from that pivot table. You'll see what I mean when we go through it. We're also going to look at how to add and remove fields from the pivot chart, and then to format the pivot chart to get it to look nice and visual so that someone can understand what it's trying to tell us. So I'm going to click over here. We went through the pivot table before in a prior video. I know some of it's cut off, but that's okay. It's not that big of a deal for now. So I want to take and this is very important in your case, because if you just take and create a pivot chart that is, off of this pivot table, and you format it to what I'm looking for, you're going to lose all sorts of data and you're going to miss a bunch of points on the teaching case. So it's important we preserve this pivot table, and to do that, I'm just trying to think here. I know it's not on the screen, how I can get it with that here. Okay, so what you're going to do, and you can see mine aren't labeled very well, is we're going to take and click on this, you can't see this, I'm holding the control button on the keyboard down. I'm going to drag it over to here, and I'm going to let go of the mouse, and you'll see it created this sheet 8 parentheses 2. What I've got here as I click back and forth is exactly identical information. So you're going to take the original one, you probably want to name it like customer pivot table or something like that for your scenario. But then this sheet 2, this is going to be maybe the customer pivot chart. We want to visualize this data, and we're going to do that using this information here. So to add the pivot chart, I click anywhere within that pivot table, and I go up to this analyze function. And you can't see this. Let me bring it into view here. Sorry. See if it, okay, there it is. So we analyze pivot chart. So I click on pivot chart, and it brings up these options. I have all sorts of things I can do to be creative, and you could add a lot of different things. For this particular teaching case, I want us to get it to look like that whale chart or that Pareto chart. And let's just pretend in this case, the data I'm giving you, we're taking a look at, if I can show you some of it here. Oops, sorry. Let me get out of there. I want to show a couple of things. So here's the chart you're going to make for me, the Pareto chart. And let's just pretend for our case this total amount is this whale curve amount is going to be like the total cash expected to pay to all the vendors that I'm going to work through that data, and then each individual line here is going to be the amount we actually expect to pay to each individual vendor. So if I click back here, what I'm trying to do is to get this amount, this running total, be that orange line that's going to be the curve, and then the cash outlay is the little bar chart amount. So I'm going to click on, again, analyze pivot chart, and I know that there's like this bar chart component or this column component to my pivot chart that I want to show. So I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to get this thing out of here. This is annoying. I close it. Here's just the pivot chart as it brings it in at a default in Excel. This guy has way too much information on it. What happens is when you convert a pivot table to a pivot chart, or actually just insert a pivot chart, it brings across every single one of these data fields you've got. And you'll notice if you did this for the pivot table you've created, it's huge. There's too much information, it becomes meaningless. So what I want to do is I want to start taking away some of this stuff and only be left with the two columns I'm really interested in, which is the total expected cash, this running total field, and the cash outlay by vendor. Now to do that, I have to just delete it or remove that window with all the fields, and I got to add it back in here. And so what I'm going to do is start changing the pivot table to only show the items I want. So I only want cash outlay and running total cash, so I can start to remove this other stuff by dragging it and moving it. There's probably a faster way to do that, but just do it this way because it's fun. Okay, now I can get rid of this. You can see now my pivot table only has two things, the cash outlay and the running total. But remember, when you're turning in the pivot table, I don't want just two things. I want all the data. That's why we made the copy, so that your pivot table maintains all the data you've worked hard on creating. And the pivot chart now only has the data that I want to display in a visual to be shown to executives or managers or whatever. So here we go. This is nice. It's a nice bar graph. It's only got two pieces of data. You can see here this would be each vendor, how much I spent on each vendor, and the blue line is how much cash I'm almost identical, right, between each vendor, how much I'm spending. And so that, if I can maybe just bring you to this kind of equivalent here, that would be the blue chart here, many, many more customers, but the orange chart would be the total dollars profited here, but total dollars spent here, and it's not a line chart, it's a bar chart. So this is kind of your whale chart here. The orange is how much we're spending in total, and the blue is how much we're spending with each vendor. So the change from orange to orange is we're adding the blue to this blue, and then to get to this orange, you're adding this blue to those other two blues. But this isn't how I want you to show it to me. I want you to show it to me as a Pareto chart. Show me that line in there, and the way to do that, it's kind of tricky. I had to mess around with it to figure it out. You click on any one of the data points that's being visualized here, and you right click, and you can go to let me just, oops, I didn't mean to click, I don't know what I clicked on there. I right click, and I'm going to click on a change series chart type. It brings up this screen, and you can see here now what I've got the option to do is to change how each data series displays on the graph. And I want to leave the blue as a chart, right? So a clustered column is what it's currently set at, because that's what we picked when we created the pivot chart. I want to change the orange though to a line, so I'm going to go and I'm going to change it down to the line here and hit OK. There's lots of stuff you can do here. You can play around with it all you want, right? We're only just scratching the surface on what's available in Excel. Hit OK, and you can see this isn't a nice curve, because we only have three data sets, data points, so we have a straight line. But when you get many, many, many data points, this is what it starts to look like, right? And so here we do have a Pareto chart, I guess you could say, and it is similar. This is what I'm looking for. I would want you to clean this up a little bit. Maybe move the legend to somewhere. And I'm not telling you exactly how you have to do it. It'll be a little flexible here, but as far as what I accept, but play around with this. This is how you start to learn Excel and what it can do and how to move these things out of the way. Maybe I don't like that view of it. It's kind of ugly and kind of plain, so I can go up here and I can change the layout, and you have many options, and I don't care which one you pick, but just play with it, right? And so now let's see if I can move these things. Well, I don't know what happened there. There's lots of stuff you can do here, and I obviously don't know all the functions. But if I want to move that legend, I can't remember where to do it. It's a fairly simple task, and now I'm drawing a blank. I could remove it, and then that gets rid of everything. Okay, now it's getting bad. So you're seeing my ineptitude here. Anyway, so what else? You should certainly add a title to each chart so that people know what it is you are telling them. So you can go up to design. You can let me just see if I can find it quick. Add chart elements, right? So I can add a chart title. I can put it above the chart. Just say, it says chart title. I can click in here and change it. I can go back to that same field, and I can probably move the legend right here. That's where it is. Sorry, that took me a while to figure out. Okay, that just gives me a little different view here. Now I want to show you one last thing. This is a lot of numbers to show, and depending on the chart you're creating, that could take up a lot of space, and I don't necessarily need to see 500,000. You can just show me in like increments of thousands or millions. And that's common when you're creating big chunks of data, and you want to make it visually appealing. So I can right click on this, and I can go to Format Axis, and of course it's off the screen, so let me move it right here. And you can see I can do like display units. That's what those numbers are, display units. And let's say I want them in thousands, and it changed it, right? I could put it in millions if I wanted. But then it rounds, you start to lose some of the unnecessary details. So thousands is probably appropriate for this example. I can close this, and that's it. It's starting to look better. So just go ahead, play with this, get it in a nice visual format, something you would want to you'd feel comfortable with showing to a boss or a superior, and that they would easily understand. I think that gets you enough to create a pivot chart. You can go through, I think, here as well and rename it. Chart 1 isn't very good. You might have so mine would be vendor payment amount or something like that. Yours would be customer profit amount. You could change the colors. You can do all sorts of things. So, okay, all right, that's enough. This is already getting too long. So good luck on that part of the case.